Now, not the crescendo moment, not the final act, all right? But acts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, have already transpired. What do I mean by that? What I mean is these operations figured out that the psychological warfare value of this subject was such that they could set up events that are completely hoaxed, beginning in the 50s and 60s, that would convince people that those events were of extraterrestrial origin, alien, when they were not. And so blur the lines between the actual ET activity and the human stagecraft, as it's called, that most people, including people at the White House, wouldn't know the difference. And I began speaking of this in the 90s. Those of you who are around, I see Ricky there and a few others who are around the 90s. I began speaking about this, and I would often say, is it real or is it Memorex? You know, the old commercial for Memorex tapes when there used to be tapes and not digital. And the problem is, who is doing a test, an assay, to see whether it's fool's gold or real gold? The problem is certainly not UFO subculture, and certainly not the media. No one in government I know, for the most part, has a clue. Even mid-level people, functionaries, within the majority intelligence committee, MAGIC, M-A-J-I-C, that runs these operations, do not know about this. Okay, Majestic, it's MAGIC, M-A-J, okay, the Majority Intelligence Committee, M-A-J-I-C. That's on the NRO document. That's the first document that's in the brief that went to Obama via Podesta, the campaign chairman for Hillary, or the former presidential candidate Hillary, and also to Mr. Trump this past summer. So we try to stay ahead of the curve, and we saw this coming. So one of the, we can talk about this later, that's conventional politics, boring, but important. But, all right, but you have to deal with it. Now, these false flag operations, and I do like the term deceptive indication and warning, very military, very precise. By the way, you mentioned that to anyone who's in counterintelligence and military intelligence, they're going to know what it means. Why? Because this is nothing new. Do you think this is the first time this has happened? You ever heard of something called the Vietnam War? How many people heard of Vietnam War? Well, I was talking to a college graduate not long ago who'd never heard of Watergate or President Nixon. So, all right, so there was something called the Vietnam War, and nobody reads anymore. And during that period, we were of course first we had some advisors in there. Kennedy wanted to pull us out, was assassinated. Johnson was reluctant to expand, and so they hoaxed an event or exaggerated an event called the Gulf of Tonkin incident. So get your history books open, but you can Google it. This is mainstream stuff, not conspiracy theory. And the Gulf of Tonkin, basically what we did, we hoaxed and exaggerated the attack on our ships in the Gulf of Tonkin, there near Vietnam, so that it would cause outrage in the public, outrage in Congress, and it stampeded President Johnson into vastly expanding our presence in Vietnam, which of course enriched, guess who? The military, industrial, financial, gang-bankster complex. So trillions of dollars are at stake here. So, and it happened to cost 58,000 American lives and probably several million Southeast Asian lives on a misadventure that was completely based on a hoaxed or an exaggerated event. You ever heard of something called 9/11? Who was alive when that happened? Any children here not alive? I've talked to some people. Well, when 9/11 happened, I don't want to go too far into this, except to say I have a gentleman who was the third highest ranking man at the Naval Research Labs, who prior to 9/11, in the Vice President's office, Vice President Cheney's, saw the plans for 9/11 prior to it occurring. He's deceased, since I'm talking about it now. I did not talk about it for years. And he was told, I used to stay at my home. He said, look, I was told my wife and my children, my grandchildren would be killed along with me if I ever mentioned this. He took it to his grave, gave me the information. God bless him, Rick Foch, who was a very high-ranking scientist, an aerospace figure in the Naval Research Labs, which is the biggest Department of Defense lab. So when 9/11 happened, which was about 4 or 5 months after the 2001 disclosure event, where we had hundreds of thousands of people contacting Congress to hold hearings on this issue, which of course when 9/11 happened, that fell way to the back burner very quickly. And they then said, well, we got to go get those guys in Afghanistan. Then they did something else, another false flag. They concocted false intelligence, yellow cake, remember the story yellow cake, uranium, out of Africa. They made up all these stories. And they put poor Colin Powell up before the UN holding a vial of anthrax and other biological and chemical weapons, saying that Saddam Hussein in Iraq had these. He did not. And he was put up there thinking that he was being provided accurate intelligence when he was not. And there are people on the inside who have come forward saying that they knew that that intelligence was wrong or very likely wrong. But based on that, we went into Iraq, where we are still embroiled, blew up that whole area of the world. Now we have ISIS. And this was all planned and known with malice aforethought. So we don't have to reach back thousands of years with Trojan horses and machinations of Machiavellian psychopaths who have been militarists in the course of human history. We only need gaze back from Vietnam to today to see the extent to which these false flag operations, hoaxed events, exaggerated threats can stampede a populace and the Congress and the presidency into very dangerous and bad decisions. Now, the mother lode, the sort of the crown jewel of that kind of event is what has been planned assiduously since the 1950s, and that is a threat from outer space that is alien, that would unite the world around a military junta, a militarism, that would put all of humanity together, but against one or more extraterrestrial races. Now that plan, which they came up with in the 1950s, has been very carefully rolled out. And as you know from my friend Carol Rosin, who was Werner von Braun, the man who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler, the V-2 rocket, and who then was brought in under Operation Paperclip by the OSS into our intelligence community and into our aerospace program after World War II. She said that on his deathbed, he said, look, first they had this plan, there would be the Cold War, and we could have had peace with the Soviet Union. Then there would be nations of concern and global terrorism. This we put out prior to 9/11, by the way. Then they would pull out the big one, and that is the threat from outer space. And it's all a lie. And that's what he kept saying, it's all a lie. And now when Carol Rosin first told me that, I said, yes, I know that. She said, you know about this already? I said, yes, I learned about this in 1993 and 1994. And she said, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, what can we do? We have to expose it. We have to expose the big lie. And if we do that, perhaps we can fulfill what The Who said when they had the famous song, we won't be fooled again. But it turns out we were fooled again. They were singing about the Vietnam War, of course. Everybody know that song, We Won't Be Fooled Again? I'm not a good singer. Anyway, but I went to go see them, actually, in Atlanta when I was an 18-year-old, and they sang that song. And it was very interesting because everyone thought, well, we're going to learn that lesson in Vietnam. We forgot it. And we had Iraq, and we forgot it. So they let a certain amount of time goes by, the population becomes complacent, we have a very short-term memory on such things, and then they move another one forward. The reason this one is the big one, that has been very well planned, and what I'm going to share tonight is going to ruin some very big plans if it's taken seriously. So what I'm telling you is extraordinarily dangerous. I mean, this is, if you were to rank this on a scale of 1 to 10 of sensitive, compartmented intelligence, information, this is as high as it goes, 10. Now, I've had it confirmed, and it's going to be in our movie Unacknowledged. And by the way, all of you who've contributed to that, thank you very much. It's going forward well. We have to have finished in about a month and then released late winter, early spring 2017. So one of the people that's going to be in this movie is an Air Force Office of Special Investigations counterintelligence officer who confirms the false flag. Name, rank, serial number. Confirms the military's involvement in staging the abductions of humans, making it look alien. Confirms that he carried bags of cash to people in the mainstream media to influence stories and coverage of this issue. And that's not the only data point we have. The key thing to understand here, I'm discussing all of this because I don't know how much time we have. And releasing a full-length feature film takes some time. But this needs to get out now because we have a new president coming in. That's why I'm here. And it's rolling down the track. This plan is on track. Now, when they began to discover, and I want to put this into 3 categories. You have assets that are material, stagecraft. And let's call these advanced aircraft of man-made origin, all right? And I'm going to show you some tonight. And it will blow your mind, and it should. But things like this. Man-made, anti-gravity, going all the way back to the late 50s and 60s. Triangular, disc, boomerang, etc. I suspect one of the world's experts on that issue is in the audience today, and I want to acknowledge him, by the way, Michael Schratt, who spent decades studying this and has put together, by far, the most comprehensive dossier and research that I have ever seen on the issue, and that's why he's here in the audience. Thank you, Michael. Now, what you need to understand is the gentleman I referred to and other people have confirmed this time period to me, that around October 1954, we attained gravity control. So gravity control meaning electromagnetic systems that affect an object so it becomes seemingly weightless, levitates, and corrects for gravity. Now, that research actually began with T. Townsend Brown and others in the 20s, if you look into this. And the Kolosky-Frost experiment in Germany and others were using very high voltage, high frequency systems at certain hertz, cycles per second, that would cause a change in the atomic structure and the magnetic field in such a way that you could essentially cancel mass. Okay, so without boring people with a physics lesson, if you make something close to massless, no weight, but weight is different from mass, massless, then you can accelerate it at enormous speeds with very little power. And it can go right-hand turns, go up and down, and if you can control for the interior, at 1G, in other words, one gravitational field, then you can go at 100,000 miles per hour, make a right-hand turn, and your brains don't come out of your ears, which was what would happen in a jet aircraft. So that work was being done in open source and then classified projects since the late 20s. The secret weapon that we had was the atomic bomb. The secret weapon Adolf Hitler was working on was this.